Hello, I'm Amy Zawi with the February 10th Red Alert Report with the Jerusalem Connection. What's good and what's bad? Well, let's start with the bad news so that we can end on a brighter note. The Biden administration has decided to rejoin the UN's Human Rights Council. This is reversing Trump's withdrawal. The original withdrawal was because of the overwhelming anti-Semitic attacks that Israel repeatedly endured when other member nations commit blatant human rights violations, but Israel was the only target of the majority of the formal condemnations. Here's a peek at the stats. The source of this is unwatch.org. The history here is so overwhelmingly obvious and hypocritical and anti-Semitic, not only because the allegations for many of these condemnations are often based on lies, they are inconsistently applied to other nations. We will monitor this situation very carefully. And then, late last week, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, has ruled that it has the jurisdiction to investigate Israel for alleged war crimes. The court's ruling on Friday paves the way for ICC prosecutors to open a probe against the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, for their defensive military actions against Gaza-based Hamas and other Palestinian terrorist groups. So this is bad news because it is clearly unjust. There's a bit of good news in it, though, that this week the Biden administration is on record as rejecting the ICC ruling in solidarity with Israel. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, rejected the international tribunal's decision to investigate Israel on these trumped-up charges of war crimes. A quote from Netanyahu: "Today, the ICC proved once again that it is a political body and it is not a judicial institution." Prime Minister went on to say, "The ICC ignores the real war crimes and instead pursues the state of Israel, a state with a strong democracy that sanctifies the rule of law and is not a member of the ICC." What is also good news is that the Biden administration is agreeing with this notion. The U.S.'s Biden administration formally rejected the ICC's jurisdictional claims made by this Hague-based tribunal. In a quote from the State Department, "We have serious concerns about the ICC's attempt to exercise jurisdiction over Israeli personnel." This was from State Department spokesman Ned Price. He announced this just last Friday. The United States has always taken the position that the court's jurisdiction should be reserved for countries that consent to it or are referred to it by the UN Security Council. This is an important issue because the State Department also said that it reflects the long-held U.S. policy that is in line with the view of many legal experts that the ICC rules incorrect. We shall continue to monitor this action and reactions of the current U.S. administration when it comes to Middle East policies as a whole and domestic policies when it comes to dealing with Israel and domestic issues such as anti-Semitism and BDS, which is actually a worldwide phenomenon. What are some glimmers of hope then, and some good news? Well, the Biden administration has indicated that it will embrace the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism. This is something my team, together with a network of Christian leaders, have been discussing, praying for, and lobbying with U.S. officials. A quote from the Department of State just last week said, "As prior U.S. administrations of both political stripes have done, the Biden administration embraces and champions the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism. We applaud the growing number of countries and international bodies that apply it. We urge all that haven't done so to do likewise." This is from Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy and Human Rights and Labor, Kara McDonald. Now, it is not clear to me how this declaration of embracing it will manifest within the current administration, especially among its various opponents, including members of Congress who push back on its adoption, noting that it calls out the BDS movement and is therefore stifling free speech. Another bit of good news, though, a new Arabic language video produced by the American Jewish Committee aims to fight anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in the Arab world. The Jewish nonprofit announced just last week that these videos are being well received. The latest video focuses on the propaganda book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a 19th century Russian work that claims to reveal a secret Jewish plot for world domination. Now, this book is, of course, an anti-Semitic hoax and has been debunked, but it had enormous impact and served as a rallying cry for anti-Semites throughout Europe, including the Nazi Party. And the book's concepts actually permeated the Arab world quite deeply over the last 100 years. Now, this new video is part of a series produced by the AJC that aims to increase the understanding of Jews and Jewish history throughout the Arab world. There is an increasing recognition that the scapegoating of Jews and Israel will not solve the world's problem, and that anti-Semitic conspiracy theories have been a stubbornly big obstacle to regional advancement. This from a spokesman from the organization. Launched in early 2020, the project's Arabic language videos have drawn hundreds and thousands of views on YouTube. And this is what's such great news, because this news coincides with the progress we are seeing in the Arab world to recognize Israel and Jews in the region as legitimate neighbors, business partners, and partners in security. This was evident in the Abraham Accords, as well as the other collaborations we are seeing between the UAE and Bahrain and other Arab leaders, together with their people, who are not only reaching a hand of peace to Israel and the Jewish people, but also being quite outspoken against the PA and Palestinian leaderships and its narrative that they've been peddling for some 80 or so years. While America's own leadership are getting their heads around some of the just and true policies and positions from the last administration regarding Israel and anti-Semitism worldwide, I am thrilled that the Arab world is slowly wiping the sand out of their eyes, and its leadership, together with its people, are growing weary of the warring attitudes and are trying to make instead peace, progress, and prosperity for their collective futures. Shavua Tov, and have a great week.